Dinner with Bill Belichick cost what?
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back in to another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athlon Sports Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 to get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Lars got a really fun show for the Everydayers today. We're going to discuss the unfortunate missed penalty on the play where Quentin Moore got hurt. We're going to talk about UW's defense and if it can dominate once again against Eastern Michigan. But Bill Belichick, as we've talked about throughout the fall, is making a return to Washington, as we covered a couple of weeks ago on this show, for a NIL fundraising dinner the weekend of the Michigan game. That it's going to be on October 4th. Lars, you and I were seriously considering finding a way to attend this event, and then we found out tickets were $25,000.
Yeah, I'm a big, kind of supporter of all things. Support your local business. Do things
Absolutely.
that are, once in a lifetime opportunities. There is a monetary tag on this one that, I think we both, we were talking about it before the show, kind of in a way, maybe not this exact figure, but expecting it would be a pricey ticket. If you think about, who it is, the event, what it's for, you're not going to be like, hey, have 500 people, $1,000 a pop, meet Bill Belichick, because Bill hates that. I mean, okay, I don't want to speak for Bill, but I have to imagine Bill would hate that. Like, you want one or two people, right? A group, let's say a party number 5 to 10,
Sure,
25, 35 in that ballpark. Maybe
probably
depending
max.
on how many people are. Right. That would be kind of my idea is what they're going for here. But again, it's something that I wrote about on Athlon Sports, where anytime you can get Bill Belichick, because I don't believe, again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I know you were there beforehand, before me, was not at the home opener. Granted, it was an 8 p.m. kickoff, so not necessarily that surprising that I didn't see him on the sidelines before the game. But again, it's a guy, he's going to be around the program. He's going to be involved. And so, yeah, I mean, I think there's a number of UW fans that are in the Seattle area, maybe Bellevue, maybe Mercer Island, that probably got a couple of 25K sitting around somewhere.
If they have that much sitting around, can we be friends? Totally off topic thing there. But no, seriously. So, there's a lot to think about with this, right? From my own perspective as a Patriots fan, yeah, it's a bummer that it's somewhat priced out, but at the same time, it's also a really fantastic way to, kind of incentivize some donors where, let's be real, if you have this much money sitting around, you were probably already donating Montlake Futures if you care that much about the program, which is great. And, we've had a lot of everydayers in our comments say, hey, we're starting with like a $25 a month donation. We're starting this, they're starting that. And all of that helps. All of that is great for the program. This is not an ad for Montlake Futures, but that all is really helpful. But when you have something where it's $25,000 for, let's just call it 3 hours with Bill Belichick, those people were probably already donating some kind of money. And this is an awesome incentive to give a little bit more, to just kind of just say, hey, we're going to nudge you a little bit more, but hey, if you get to this, we're going to give you dinner with Bill Belichick in return. And it's advertised as, because when we talked to Jedd Fisch, he mentioned this in early August. He said, yeah, there's going to be a lot of one-on-one time, there's the full 9 yards with pictures, autographs, whatever else. So it's really cool to be able to have this and incentivize it. And Lars, really the biggest point is exactly what you said, is whenever you have the opportunity to have Bill Belichick help out with anything, you take it. That's it.
And this is legitimate involvement because he's been at practice in the spring, been at the coaches clinic in the spring, been in fall camp, brought his friends out to fall camp. Bill's not just doing this and saying, okay, you know what, my son happens to coach in the city. I'll show up for one day, make, a paycheck and leave. I'm not trying to blow it out of proportion and saying Bill's going to all of a sudden move to Bainbridge and turn Nantucket into Bainbridge. I'm not saying that. I would personally love that. And I think Bill would actually like Bainbridge because I know a lot of people do. But there's something about kind of just having that connection, that plug, that relationship, whatever you want to call it. And I think that's kind of what the modern age of college football is because we've seen Bill Belichick go to Nebraska and some other programs, but it's not the same level of involvement. It's not the same aura that comes with, hey, my son's also here, and Carroll's also here, and Luke Del Rio's also here, and all of these guys that I know of that go back to my seasons at New England are all here. I have friends that I can go visit, like Matt Rule when he coached against the Panthers and all that sort of stuff, but it's a completely different level. And Jedd would be absolutely moronic to not, in some way, shape, or form, involve him as much as Bill feels comfortable in the program. And again, obviously, Bill, we make the joke Bill has an office, but he really doesn't because it sounds like they just throw their stuff in an office, probably in Steve's office if we're being real. And, when the coaches are not in there, that's when they use those sort of offices. But this is really because you don't know how long Steve's going to be here. And it's not that Bill wouldn't come out next year. But let's say Steve gets a defensive coordinator job in the NFL or his dad gets another head coaching job and he goes back with his dad to the NFL. That now becomes a little more of a distant sell where you still have it. Yeah. And you still say, hey, you can go do this with Steve and Bill and all that. And we have this, but it almost is more like Arizona because somebody mentioned to me that Bill came to some Arizona practices. And I'm like, first of all, I don't remember that. 1 and 2, he was still employed. This is a much different situation where Bill's not unemployed, but Bill's not coaching. And so this is like the one fall where it's, hey, he doesn't have to worry about game planning, doing whatever. So, 3 hours. Did they say where the dinner's at? Like, do you get to pick?
You can probably assume it's at like the Metropolitan Grill or somewhere like that. Like, I don't, there's no just definite location in the ad. But I'm really glad you mentioned all this because there's a few things that I really want to get off my chest. The first one being the last time you and I talked about Bill Belichick on this show, and went down this road of when we first heard this was happening and, talked about that. We got some comments from people that definitely weren't UW fans. So like it is what it is, but saying, oh, this is just clickbait, like he just attended a practice. And first of all, like, no, that's not what it was. I'd be, very clear if you listen for a couple seconds. But one of the things on that note is Lars, like I have to say it again, like it goes back to exactly what you said. You have this opportunity, you exploit it to the fullest. Where, if the biggest connection is because Steve is here and not because, Jedd coached for him, fine. That is what it is. Or if Jedd really does have a deep relationship, which it sounds like the two of them do, if that really is why he's coming, you have to take advantage of that. You have to utilize it as much as possible. And, it goes so far beyond just the fact that he's unemployed, the fact that he is hanging out and willing to help as much as he possibly can, where that's all great. And that's all one thing. But beyond that, and beyond, just the thought of him getting a job this year, how great is it that not only is all this happening, but it's happening as you're making this move to the Big Ten. And as Jake Butt said on this show the other day, when he's talking about, hey, Washington has one of the top programs in the country, even though it's never really realized as such. Just getting Bill to do these things in this transition period and in this first year of the Big Ten is another fantastic way of getting more eyeballs on Washington and people saying, oh, wait, Bill Belichick is hanging out where? He's spending a lot of his time where? And that's great. All it's doing is getting more eyeballs on the program. And even if you look at this and you scoff at it, you say, who's going to pay that much money? Clearly people are. Clearly some people are going to do that. So it's still a fantastic investment just to make sure that all of this happens.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if it's still a tax write-off or not. I would have to imagine on some level it is given, but with the whole change but that's the other thing. It's like you mentioned the Big Ten change is also just kind of this new wave of like this is the perfect time for Jedd Fisch to implement this NFL kind of mindset scheme because I know Sark tried to do it back in the day. Peterson in a way had his own. Hey, we got DBU, et cetera, et cetera. This is a program-wide. This is a campus, this is a university, institution-wide sort of mindset saying, hey, look, we want to make this a destination, and we want to make this a permanent destination to kind of have a revolving door of either coordinators or players going from high school to college to the NFL. And in coordinators' case, college, NFL to college back to the NFL. And so this is almost, again, not to bring up old sores, but if Kalen was ever going to leave, picked a great time to do it. Like, had he waited 1 more year, had he waited 2 more years, and then you got to kind of, okay, now I got to adjust to the Big Ten. It's like, no, Jedd gets to build everything in his image right from year one.
With a much deeper pocket than he would have at his other location. But that's besides the point. Lars, can Washington's defense continue their dominant stretch in game 2? Which we'll get to right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 to get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. And, I'm going to go back to the well that we were on a couple weeks ago as Lars and I kind of decide who the official team of Locked On Huskies is going to be. Check out the Chicago Bears, where the Vikings, the Packers, the Lions, the NFC North is going to be a really, really tough division. But if you wanted to go check out the odds of the Bears making the playoffs, the Bears maybe winning the NFC North on FanDuel, those might be a pretty smart bet. Washington's defense was really impressive in week 1. There's some things that need to be cleaned up on the ground, but especially as a pass defense, feels like they're in line to have another really, really strong week against Eastern Michigan.
Yeah, and when you look at Eastern Michigan, now that it's the listeners listening to on Thursday, it's not necessarily the most threatening offense. I think obviously Cole Snyder is better than what they had last season. Just going back and looking at some of their tape and film from last season, he had more passing yards than their quarterback had all in a single game last season. That should actually, it's 2 years technically starting the previous starter. So to me, obviously Cole Snyder is a different dynamic quarterback, but he's not the true veteran experience of Will Rogers, where most of his damage was done on the MAC at Buffalo. I'm not saying the MAC's terrible, but Will Rogers passing for 12.5 K in the SEC versus somebody else passing for 5 in the MAC. Like, to me, there's a little bit of a gap there when it comes to experience. So it's a step up, I think, from what you're going to see from Weber State, where it'll be a test. But sure, as I mentioned earlier in the week, you're getting Javon Parker back. Whether it's clearly Steve's never going to acknowledge individual players and snap counts, but whether Logan Sagapolu gets more than 4 snaps against Eastern Michigan, and I think he will. And the reason why I mentioned those two guys specifically, and I know you mentioned the pass defense, we'll get there. But yeah, what's the pass defense's best friend? A great pass rush. And when you have interior pressure with Javon Parker and a big nose tackle that can just plug up any running back, and also, Logan can move. Like, Logan's not a just like park you in like a bus where you just park it in front and he doesn't move. I mean, he can move a little bit. No, he's no Deshaun Lynch, but he can move a little bit. So right, I'm curious to see how the impact of those two guys help slow down their run game. Because to me, it's more of a matter of if they can get their run game going, then Cole Snyder will. He only got like 1.5 receivers. Like what Washington has at tight end looks like what Eastern Michigan has at wide receiver. And I'm not saying it's truly correlated, but it's just when you look at their tape, it wasn't like he was able to hit 5, 6, 7 different guys. There's only like 2 or 3 to worry about.
So I'm glad you mentioned that, because the one thing that I'm watching, and you and I are certainly going to talk about this a lot more on the Friday show, is when you mentioned Cole Snyder, I don't want to say, he's the most mobile guy, but he's very good at getting out of the pocket, finding rush lanes, and doing a whole bunch of different things with his legs, where he had, I believe it was something like 6 carries for close to 30 yards and a touchdown in their opener. And when I'm looking at him, one thing that I saw Richie Munoz do one too many times for my liking, in what was a really, really strong showing against Weber State, was he was able to escape the pocket. There was no contain, there was no quarterback spy, there's nothing like that, where again, it all comes down to the scheme and the plan, whatever. But he was able to pick up yardage with his legs one too many times. And I have a feeling that Steve is going to slightly adjust the plan to be able to counter what he's able to do. But, you look at their ground attack, and it was good. I don't think it was great, but it was solid. It was good enough to get the job done. And I think that's going to be something that I'm really intrigued by, is, instead of lining up as an outside linebacker rushing the passer a little bit, is Alfonso Tuputala going to stay inside, or is Carson Bruner or Brian Parham, or whoever's out there, are they going to stay inside and kind of play a little bit more in that spy role to make sure that he can't get outside the pocket, to make sure that he's not, just crossing the line of scrimmage and, there's 12 yards before the nearest defender can get there. So that's one thing that I'm really curious about, where I think that Steve's going to make all the right adjustments, but it's going to be something to watch for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's a good kind of 1.5 test for Steve, because now we get to see, we've seen what he's like in fall camp. We've seen what he's like after week 1. Now, what changes can you make? How is your in-season adjustment? Because I think that's what really makes the mark of a good coaching staff is, can you make those changes from week to week? And because you have the roster to do it. You have the players. It's not like you don't have the depth. But for me, it's a matter of first of all, again, as I've said many times, Steve Belichick said this is the Washington defense. Like it or not, a staple of the Washington defense is kind of having a mobile quarterback beat you for a few more first downs than you probably shouldn't have. But respectfully, again, Steve, still gets the 3 points, almost shut out. Handled that question great, by the way. But it was something about kind of, I think I'm curious which linebacker. I'm assuming probably. It's not one which matters more, but in that spiral, would you have Carson or Zoe more for a guy like Cole Snyder? Because to me, I would almost put Carson, but I could make an argument. But I could see an argument being made for Zoe, because I know. I mean, first of all, somebody asked, I think after the game, was like, who had the helmet heads? I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's Carson. Pretty sure we've been all over this that it's Carson. So
the thing with Carson in that spot is you certainly want the guy who's going to be the best at just running, the best guy who's not just in coverage necessarily, but the best sideline to sideline player who's going to close that ground quickly. And Alphonso Tupatal is really good at that, but he's not what Carson Bruner is when it comes to closing ground and finishing plays. So I think that he'd be the guy that you want to do that, where, you think about it last year, and that was something that Eddie Ulofoshio did really well, where it's that same discussion. And I'm really curious to see how Steve counters it. Where is it going to be something where the edge rushers are going to just stay upfield and they're going to keep a true contain to make sure that if he's stepping up, he's stepping into a Sebastian Valdez or a Javon Parker, or because there were a couple times where we saw, one player, because it happened on both sides of the field, get a little bit undisciplined and stray up the field too far, which opened that rush lane for Richie Munoz to get through. And that's something where, all right, how is that going to be countered? How is Steve going to try to counter that?
You're right. Although I do think there was way too many design runs. Like, you could clearly see there was a few, handful of plays even in that second half where Munoz was trying to do a quarterback sneak or quarterback draw or whatever, and Udo was able to snuff it out. And I think that's kind of why Cole Snyder having a better arm and just being an overall. There's no disrespect to Richie. Again, Richie Munoz, redshirt freshman. Cole Snyder came into college football before Will Rogers, people. Like, Cole's been here since World War II. Cole's been here since World War I. To make the joke that we had before the podcast got going. But so that's, you're going to have a quarterback who knows what he's doing, knows how to make those in-game adjustments, and that's why I think it's going to be a good second test. Because again, when you look at, I was just looking at the PFF grades of the Eastern Michigan pass offensive line. You should find a way to get home against that offensive line. Now, is it going to be gangbusters? Is it going to be perfect? No. But I think if Eastern Michigan gets 6 sacks against UMass, I think UW can find a couple, I would hope. And it's one of those, especially as you mentioned with the secondary getting improved and, potentially guys getting more comfortable in scheme. I would assume this would be a better, like the offense talks about. If that was the worst game he played, this one should be a little bit better.
Right. And that's something where when you think about the secondary, what does that look like? Where they had a solid first game throwing the ball, Eastern Michigan did. It wasn't, perfect by any means, but it was solid. It was solid enough. 18-27, 240 yards and a touchdown, where that's going to get the job done. But what's that going to look like against Washington, where Richie Munoz didn't necessarily have the arm strength to beat the corners on a couple of those different plays, but I think it kind of goes beyond that, Lars, where when I look at the secondary, I just kind of think, especially from what we saw at Fisch and Belichick, Thaddeus Dixon do, that they're going to smother guys, that they've done a really good job in coverage. And that's one of the biggest things that, that the scheme showed me in week 1, is that these corners are going to thrive in this scheme and in these coverages that Steve is calling for them.
Oh, absolutely. Well, first of all, Thaddeus played a team high 65 snaps.
That
tells you all you need to know right there. And I think it's also the multiplicity of the defense where, we saw 3 safeties lined up. We saw, 3 linebackers. There's so many different things that you can do. And the fact, and by the way, I got to give a shout out to Elijah Jackson. Highest graded DB on the team in coverage week 1, coming off the bench. So I think it's another good problem to have if, Thad's still holding it down as a starter and clearly had a good game. but Elijah's still right there. And then we saw Elijah line up at safety as that third safety a couple of times in fall camp. So there's plenty. And again, as we said last week or earlier this week, probably about 50-60% of this team has been shown, and that's being generous. Like I honestly probably say like 40, but I'll just be conservative and say, because it's the regular season, now we're in season, you're probably above 50, but not by much.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I know you and I have talked about throughout the week, where I don't know if that's going to change this weekend, but I don't think that matters either. Where getting guys healthy and getting guys more integrated in this for, I think Rutgers is the game that I'm really looking at, where it's, if we're seeing 100% of what this team wants to put on film, that's the week we're going to see it. Where Greg Schiano is fantastic at scheming, especially defensively. But when we look at just everything on both sides of the ball, really is more I'm trying to say there is everything on both sides of the ball will be shown by the time we get to Rutgers week. And until that point, it's what are they willing to show? What are they willing to do to obviously still win games? Where, if it's a closer game against Wazoo or even against Eastern Michigan than he might like, they're probably going to pull out some extra stops that we haven't seen just yet. But from a lot of the things that we've seen, where when I can count on one hand the amount of stunts that we saw, that were drive in and drive out throughout fall camp, it just means that, yeah, there's certainly a lot left in the tank. And Lars, we got to get to some unfortunate news where there was a pretty big missed penalty in that first game against Weber State on the play that Quentin Moore got hurt, which we'll get to right after a message from our friends over at LinkedIn. Because when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free, because LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role in any given month. Over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. You can hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. And that's why LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the hiring process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockdowncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockdowncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So, Lars, we saw it on Twitter first on Tuesday night that there was a play on the play where Quentin Moore got hurt, took a hit right to the knee, that the Weber State player came off the sideline. And, we waited a little bit longer to record this episode because the Big Ten did come back and say, yeah, that was a missed penalty. Should have been a 5-yard penalty added to the end of the play, which doesn't change it. It's not a dead ball foul. You don't stop the play. So it doesn't necessarily negate what happened, which obviously sucks for Quentin, but it also just sucks for the team. And there are if Quentin's not able to play this weekend, there are 2 healthy scholarship tight ends for the Eastern Michigan game.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to unpack from, and as I told you before the show, not a nothing play in terms of what happened to Quentin. Obviously, that was unfortunate, and you never want an injury. But aside from his 14-yard catch, it was a nothing play. Like, there wasn't anything that, was, I don't think it prevented them from winning the game. But it is still significant, as you mentioned, when you only have, it's now what? Not even, it's DeGraaf and it's Owen Couts.
And it's Keleki Latu.
Oh, and Keleki Latu. So you have 3 tight ends. So 2 scholarships.
2 scholarship, yeah.
And so I will say, shout out to Keleki. Had a decent pass blocking grade on PFF week 1, 40+ snaps. Good job. But with that being said, which again makes that addition also more important. Wow. But it's why, when we talked about Quentin before the season, it wasn't like, hey, he's got to have a Travis Kelce 1,000-yard. But it's just when you're so thin at that position already, there's not much. I know Brendan Carroll was asked about this before this on Tuesday. If there's any defensive lineman that can convert to offensive line or not offensive line, tight end. And when I look at the room, it's like, or I look at the roster, I don't really see it. Like I truly don't. And so that's kind of why the only body that you're going to have. And I will say, I don't know if I did it in fall camp. I know I did it at one point because I wanted to give Owen Couts a shout out. Former walk-on receiver who converted.
Oh, yeah, I'm a big fan of Owen Couts.
We both are, because it converted to tight end this past season, and he was a guy at practice where it's, when we chart these plays and we chart, hey, Will so-and-so to Queets to so-and-so and so-and-so, Damon to so-and-so, it's when you start to see those guys stack up more and more and more, and it's not just one play here, a week goes by, another play there. Like, Owen was a guy day in and day out making plays at practice. And so, obviously, is he a guy is he your number one tight end? No. But there's plenty of guys in this program. Eddie was a walk-on. You mentioned him earlier. Eddie was a walk-on that ended up being a scholarship. I'm not saying Owen Couts is going to get a scholarship, but we've seen crazier things happen. And so Quentin had to miss some significant time. And obviously with Charlie Kroll being out for the season and Ryan Otten being probably, about 3 weeks away is what Jedd said.
That's what Jedd said, yeah.
You still need another body in that room. And I think kind of Owen provides the almost best body you can look for on the team, not among the guys that are already at that position as a scholarship player.
Yeah, so I certainly agree with you. And that goes back to one thing that I had heard a lot last year regarding Owen Couts, where I heard a lot that Jamarcus Shepard was a huge fan of his, where he's a really talented athlete at 6'4". I think he's up to 230, 235 now since he's playing tight end, but when he was playing wide receiver. And it's a guy where, with the guys in front of him, there was never going to be an opportunity for him to get reps, even at the end of games, where, that's when he had to get Denzel Boston in the game because there were just so many talented bodies in front of him. But it's something where Owen was more than willing to make the position change. And I'm rooting for the kid. I really want to see how it works out for him. I think that'd be great. But it still just kind of shows a very concerning amount of depth at the position, where Charlie, as Jedd said, is a bit of a freak accident, happened, one of the last days of camp. It's a bummer. It's the things that happen. And hopefully with the injury, he's able to, participate in the spring and in the fall and is ready to go next season. With Ryan, same thing, where you'd like to see him back in a couple of weeks. Hopefully Quentin comes back in a couple of weeks too. And all of a sudden we're looking at, a very, very different depth here, where we saw what Decker can do. Scores a touchdown on his first career snap. That's great. Keleki, we've seen him as a pass catcher. He can certainly be a threat as a pass catcher. Where I'm most curious to see where this is impacted in is the run game, where Quentin Moore is a fantastic run blocker. And is Keleki, I think obviously Keleki is going to be the guy to fill that role, but is that, I'm not knocking him when I say this, but is he going to be the same level of blocker that Quentin can be? Because that's what gives me pause.
I don't think he has to be. I mean, I agree. I see your principle and premise, and that's why I mentioned he had a decent pass blocking grade. But I think that point speaks more to why you have 6 potential starting offensive linemen. And I'm not saying you have 6 start, but you have clearly, like, Landon can start, D'Angelo can start, Enoch can start, Guard can start, and Drew can start, and Swana can start. There you go. Boom. You have an extra offensive lineman somewhere along that line. And you also have Zach Henning, who could be a 6 blocker. And again, I'm not saying it's an ideal situation, but I think that, to your principle, is why you go. That's first of all why you go on and get Keleki as a veteran. But now you have 2 split out tight ends or guys that are more natural pass catchers. All you're looking for is extra bodies along the edges of the line to protect. That's what we're saying, right? And so, to me, why not? Like, I know you're still at least down a couple of bodies at offensive line with Jaquette and McCree, and I think there's 1 or 2 others somewhere in that mix. But regardless, there's enough bodies, when you put Zach Henning as a 6th offensive lineman / tight end, or Landon as first of all, would we not love to see that? Would we not love to see Landon Hatchet 6 tight ends splits out for a 5-yard touchdown catch? I mean, come on.
With all due respect for Landon, the guy I want to see most at that position is Zach Henning. Like, truly, I think that'd be the guy that I'd love to see the most. I love the way he moves. I think that'd be really fun. But Lars, this kind of brought up as we were planning the show out. This really brings up something that you and I were discussing on this here program a couple of weeks ago. And that's any potential interest from Oregon and Vander Ploog, where Vander certainly was interested before his commitment to Washington. You and I still feel that he's solid, that there's nothing to worry about there. And this is why, where Quentin and Keleki are both probably going to be gone at the end of the year. And that still leaves this position rather thin, where if they go hit the portal for another guy at the position, I'm not going to be shocked. Where if Decker's the starter and, you're working in Naone and Vander Ploog next season, great. Like that's one thing. Ryan Otten, you want to see if he's healthy, of course, and Charlie Kroll, same thing. But if they go get another guy out of the transfer portal, I'm not going to be shocked. But all this is saying is all the opportunities are there for Vander, Ploog and Naone both to come in and contribute early next season, just like Decker did.
And do you not see a little bit of like half Decker, half Keleki and Barron and Vander Ploog as kind of that split out Latu guy where you're getting a guy who's in Naone who's a more polished blocker and Ploog who's a more polished catcher, and you're bringing them in the same class. You can see exactly what George is trying to do, where it's okay, we're losing a blocker and a veteran pass catcher. Here we go. And first of all, if they don't bring in a transfer tight end, that either means one of two things. Otten lit it up in the back half of the season. Coons lit it up in the back half of the season. And even with either of those lighting it up, no, it's either way. With both of them lighting it up, they need to go get an extra body just for the sake of having depth and seniority at that position. Because you're going to look at it, Ryan will be a junior or senior with no experience.
He'll be a junior in terms of eligibility. So I agree with the second half of your statement, depth and seniority. But the first half, I don't think that's going to matter. Where if they go get a guy at the position, great. Like this really shouldn't be what we're focusing on. But with just 2 scholarship bodies that are healthy at the position right now, we have to. I think it's really going to depend on how comfortable they feel with Decker, truly more than anything else. Where if they're saying, all right, Decker, we know you're going to start and we're going to have Vander and Barron working at various points, great. I think that's what it's going to come down to at the end of the day, where they're not afraid to play these guys early on. And that's just kind of going to be the biggest point on all of it, is because if all of a sudden all these guys are healthy, that's 5 bodies. Do you want to put a 6th in there? You certainly could, but it's a complicated thing, man. And I feel like that's probably the best place for us to get out of here today, because it's going to be a really fluid situation to monitor, where the more that we see from Decker, I feel is really going to be what ends up defining this position for 2025 and beyond. And Lars, that being said, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the everydayers tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. And thank you for making Locked On Huskies your first listen of the day. Now go check out the Locked On College Football Podcast from NIL deals, never-ending conference realignment rumors. Our guy, Spencer McLaughlin, gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link to Locked On College Football in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We got so much more fun stuff coming for you throughout the season. So please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So please make sure you hit that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. You any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Friday.